The glass dome of Colony Nova 7 gleamed like a pearl against the swirling clouds of Jupiter's vast atmosphere. Inside, the Astrobio Research Complex hummed with activity even at this late hour, its blue-tinted lights casting eerie shadows through the corridors. Mira Hayes stood alone in Laboratory 6, her reflection fragmented across multiple monitoring screens as she checked. For the third time that night, the preservation chambers housing the last genetic samples of an extinct alien species. Status report on Diori embryonic matrix, she commanded, her voice barely audible above the persistent hum of the incubation units. Stable, responded the AI system. Temperature at optimal range. No cellular degradation detected in the last 48 hours. Mira nodded absently, pressing her palm against the cool surface of the primary containment unit. Inside, suspended in nutrient solution, floated what looked like nothing more than a cluster of iridescent cells, the last remaining genetic material of the Diori, a species that had vanished from the galaxy long before humans had even dreamed of leaving Earth. 2 years of work, she whispered to herself, and still nothing more than a frozen potential. In her 36 years, Mira had never imagined she would end up here, light years from Earth, responsible for preserving what remained of an extinct alien civilization. She had left behind family, friends, and a promising career in terrestrial bioengineering for this assignment. The isolation was supposed to feel like a worthy sacrifice for science. Most days, it just felt lonely. The year was 2289, and humanity had spread throughout the solar system and beyond, establishing research outposts like Nova 7 to study the growing number of alien civilizations they had encountered. Diori DNA had been recovered from an ancient crashed spacecraft on Europa, preserved in the ice for countless millennia. Mira's assignment was clear: maintain, study, and potentially revive this genetic heritage under strictly controlled conditions. What wasn't in her job description was the growing pressure from Astrobio's board of directors for measurable progress. Their last communication had been terse: either show results within the month or prepare for reassignment. Research funding wasn't unlimited, even 2 centuries into humanity's expansion among the stars. Mira sighed, checking her wristpad. Nearly midnight station time. The rest of the research team had long since retired to their quarters in the residential section. Only night security and a few monitoring AIs remained active. Lights down to 30%, she instructed, gathering her notes. I'll continue tomorrow. As she reached for her jacket, the overhead lights flickered. Once, twice. The monitors blinked out momentarily before returning to life. Warning, announced the facility AI. Electromagnetic storm approaching. Intensity exceeding safety parameters. All non-essential systems entering protective shutdown. Mira froze. Jupiter's radiation belts frequently produced electromagnetic disturbances, but the station's shielding usually provided more than adequate protection. A storm strong enough to trigger protective measures was rare. Time to impact, she demanded, already moving toward the preservation chambers. 3 minutes, 17 seconds. Recommend immediate. The lights went out completely, plunging the laboratory into darkness, broken only by the emergency strip lighting along the floor. The gentle hum of the preservation systems fell silent. No, 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 Mira muttered, fumbling for her emergency kit. She extracted a handheld generator, a small device designed to provide emergency power to critical systems. Her hands trembled as she connected it to the primary Diori containment unit. The storm hit before she could secure the backup systems. The laboratory shuddered. Sparks erupted from multiple console panels. Mira was thrown against the wall, the generator clattering across the floor. For several terrifying seconds, the station's artificial gravity fluctuated, sending unsecured equipment floating briefly before crashing back down. Through the chaos, one thought dominated Mira's mind: the preservation chamber. If it failed, 2 years of work and the last remnants of an entire species would be lost forever. When the emergency systems finally engaged 30 seconds later, Mira scrambled to her feet and rushed to the primary containment unit. The display panel was dark, its temperature readout offline. With shaking hands, she manually overrode the access controls and raised the sealed lid. Peering inside, she expected to find cellular degradation already underway. Instead, what she saw made her breath catch. The previously inert cluster of cells was pulsating with a soft, rhythmic light. "That's impossible," she whispered. According to all her research, Diori's cellular material required precise temperature and nutrient regulation to prevent deterioration. The power failure should have begun an irreversible cascade of cellular death. Instead, the electromagnetic storm appeared to have triggered something entirely unexpected: cellular division. The genetic material was growing, evolving, right before her eyes. For the next several hours, Mira worked feverishly, documenting the unprecedented development while struggling to restore the laboratory systems. By dawn, she had managed to stabilize the most critical equipment. But the Diori sample continued to change in ways that defied all scientific predictions. When Security Director Hans Berger arrived for the morning inspection, Mira had already made her decision. She would not report this development, not yet. Astrobio's protocols for unexpected xenobiological events were clear: immediate quarantine and likely termination of the specimen for safety reasons. "Quite a storm last night," Berger remarked, his eyes scanning the laboratory for signs of damage. "Any issues with your precious samples, Dr. Hayes?" Mira stood strategically positioned between Berger and the primary containment unit, which she had hastily covered with research materials. "Nothing critical," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "Some data loss, but the preservation systems performed as expected." Berger nodded, seemingly satisfied. "The board has scheduled another review for next week. They'll expect a full damage report and progress update." "Of course," Mira said, already calculating how much time she would need. At the current rate of development, the Diori cells would soon be far too large to hide. After Berger departed, Mira locked the laboratory doors and returned to the containment unit. The cellular mass had doubled in size during their brief conversation. More concerning, it had begun to develop what appeared to be rudimentary organ structures. "What are you becoming?" she whispered, leaning closer to the transparent surface. As if in response, the developing organism pulsed with light once more, a pattern that sent chills down Mira's spine. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Over the next week, Mira practically lived in the laboratory, sleeping on a cot she'd smuggled in from the medical bay. She falsified reports, manipulated security footage, and diverted enough resources to sustain the rapidly developing Diori life form. By the 5th day, what had begun as a cluster of cells had somehow developed into an embryo roughly the size of Mira's palm. By the 7th day, it had features, what appeared to be eyes, though still closed, limbs that occasionally twitched, and skin that shimmered with a pearlescent quality, unlike anything Mira had ever seen. And then, on the morning before the board's scheduled review, Mira arrived at the laboratory to find something impossible waiting for her. The containment unit had cracked open from within. Sitting beside it, regarding her with wide, opalescent eyes, was what appeared to be a small child. The child, if that term even applied, had the general shape of a human child, perhaps 3 or 4 years old. But the similarities ended there. Its skin had the same pearlescent quality as the embryo, shifting subtly between pale blue and silver, depending on the light. It had no hair, but instead a fine pattern of what looked like bioluminescent markings across its scalp. Its hands had 6 slender fingers each, and its eyes, enormous in its delicate face, were entirely white with faintly glowing pupils. When it saw Mira, the child made a soft trilling sound and reached toward her with tiny, perfect hands. Mira's scientific training warred with an immediate, visceral response she hadn't expected. She should sound the alarm. Initiate containment protocols, notify the board. Instead, she found herself moving forward, kneeling before this impossible being. "Hello," she said softly, her voice wavering. "I'm Mira." The child tilted its head, studying her with those luminous eyes. Then, to Mira's astonishment, it mimicked the movement of her lips, though no sound emerged. "You're trying to communicate," Mira realized. "You're learning." For the first time in her scientific career, Mira Hayes made a decision that had nothing to do with protocols or research objectives. She picked up her jacket, wrapped it gently around the child's shoulders, and made a plan. She would hide this child, this miracle, in her private quarters until she could figure out what to do next. "I'm going to call you Leary," she whispered, as she carefully lifted the child into her arms. "It means light in an old Earth language, and I'm going to keep you safe." As she held Leary close, Mira felt something brush against her consciousness. Not a sound, but a sensation, like a question mark formed of pure emotion. She nearly dropped the child in shock. "Was that you?" Leary's eyes brightened. And again, Mira felt that tentative touch against her mind. Curiosity, wonder, and something else. Trust. "Telepathy," Mira breathed. "You're telepathic." This changed everything. Not only had she hidden the development of an alien life form, but that life form possessed abilities far beyond what any human might consider safe. If the board discovered this, there would be no mercy for either of them. Smuggling Leary to her quarters proved surprisingly simple. The morning shift change provided adequate distraction, and most of the station's security systems were still being repaired after the electromagnetic storm. Once inside her small apartment, Mira quickly transformed her storage closet into a makeshift hideaway, complete with blankets and emergency rations. "This is your home now," she told Leary, who explored the space with evident fascination, trailing slender fingers over every surface. "At least until I can figure something out." The next days established a precarious routine. Mira would secure Leary in the apartment with entertainment tablets, loaded with basic language programs, before heading to the laboratory, where she maintained the facade of continuing her regular work. In the evenings, she would hurry back, always half expecting to find security officers waiting, or Leary discovered. Instead, she found increasingly rapid development. Within 2 weeks, Leary had grown to resemble a human child of about 7, though still with distinctly alien features. More remarkably, the child had begun to speak, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. "Mira," Leary would say each time she returned, the word flowing like music in the child's otherworldly voice. "You came back." "Always," Mira would promise, though she knew it was a promise she might not be able to keep. One evening, as they shared a meal of synthesized protein that Mira had carefully adjusted to suit Leary's unique physiology, the child looked up suddenly. "What am I?" Leary asked, those luminous eyes fixing on Mira's face. The question caught Mira off guard. How much should she explain? How much could a child, even one developing as rapidly as Leary, understand about extinction, about being the last of one's kind? "You're Diori," she said finally. "A very special person from a place far away." "Where are the others like me?" Mira set down her utensil, choosing her words carefully. "There aren't any others, Leary, not anymore." "Just me?" The child's voice wavered, and the lights in the apartment flickered in response to Leary's distress. "Just you," Mira confirmed gently. "But you're not alone. You have me." Leary was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then, with childlike directness, "Are you my mother?" The question struck Mira with unexpected force. In all her years focused on career advancement and scientific achievement, she had never considered motherhood. Yet, here she was, caring for this extraordinary child, feeling protective in a way that transcended scientific curiosity. "Would you like me to be?" she asked carefully. Leary nodded, those strange eyes blinking slowly. "Yes, I would like a mother." "Then I am your mother," Mira said, surprised by the emotion thick in her voice. "And you are my child." That night, Leary curled against Mira as they both lay on the small bed, the child's soft bioluminescence casting gentle patterns across the ceiling. As Leary drifted toward sleep, a word formed in the space between them, not spoken aloud, but pressed gently into Mira's consciousness. "Tam," came the telepathic whisper, and somehow Mira understood its meaning. "Mama." Tears sprang to her eyes as she held Leary closer. What had begun as a scientific anomaly, a research subject, had become something far more precious. She would protect this child, this last Diori, whatever the cost. But the cost would soon prove higher than she anticipated. The following morning, Mira received an urgent notification from the facility AI. Priority message from Director Berger. Immediate response required. With a sense of foreboding, Mira activated her communications panel. Berger's stern face appeared, his expression even more severe than usual. "Dr. Hayes," he began without preamble, "our systems have detected multiple inconsistencies in your research logs. Power usage in Laboratory 6 dropped significantly 8 days ago. Yet your reports show continuous operation of all preservation systems. Furthermore, your personal quarters are registering unusual energy signatures." Mira's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "I've been running diagnostics on the backup systems following the storm damage. That would explain the fluctuations." "Perhaps," Berger replied, clearly unconvinced. "Regardless, the board has expedited their review. They'll be conducting a full inspection tomorrow at Oro 900 hours. I suggest you ensure all your research is properly documented." The message ended, leaving Mira staring at the blank screen. She had 24 hours before everything fell apart. Frantically, she messaged her closest colleague, Dr. Elias Wright, a robotics specialist who had occasionally assisted with her research. If anyone might help her, it would be Elias, whose unorthodox views on extraterrestrial rights had earned him both respect and suspicion among the scientific community. "Need to speak privately," she typed. "Emergency." 30 minutes later, they met in a maintenance corridor near the station's hydroponics section, one of the few areas with minimal surveillance. "This had better be important," Elias said, his tall frame hunched to avoid the low ceiling. Then, noting her expression, "Mira, what's wrong?" "I need your help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what I'm about to tell you could end both our careers." She told him everything: the storm, Leary's impossible development, the weeks of deception. As she spoke, Elias's expression shifted from disbelief to wonder to grave concern. "You've been harboring a telepathic alien child in your quarters for 2 weeks," he finally said. "Mira, do you realize what the board will do if they find out? Best case scenario, they'll take the child for intensive study. Worst case." He didn't need to finish. They both knew the historical precedents for how research corporations handled potentially dangerous extraterrestrial discoveries. "I know," Mira said. "That's why I need your help. I need to create a convincing cover story before tomorrow's inspection." Elias paced the narrow corridor, thinking rapidly. "We could say the embryo was damaged beyond recovery in the storm, and you've been attempting to salvage partial genetic sequences for future cloning attempts. They'll want to see evidence," Mira pointed out. "Then we'll give them evidence. I can help you falsify the necessary data." He paused, studying her face. "But Mira, this is temporary at best. Leary is growing, developing. You can't keep a sentient being hidden forever, especially one with telepathic abilities." "I know," she admitted. But I just need time to figure out a more permanent solution. Elias nodded slowly. There are whispers about a coalition forming, scientists and ethicists advocating for extraterrestrial rights. They're still underground, but they might be able to help. Contact them, Mira urged. Meanwhile, I'll prepare for tomorrow's inspection. They worked through the night, Elias helping Mira fabricate convincing research logs and prepare a damaged sample that could pass cursory examination. When dawn approached, Mira returned to her quarters to find Leary awake, drawing intricate patterns on a tablet. You're worried, Leary said without looking up. I can feel it. Mira sat beside the child, marveling as always at how quickly Leary's language skills had developed. Yes, some people are coming today who might not understand how special you are. I need you to stay here, very quiet, until I come back. Leary set down the tablet, revealing a drawing of two figures, one clearly Mira, the other a slender, luminous being, standing together beneath what appeared to be stars. Will they take me away? Leary asked, those otherworldly eyes fixed on Mira's face. No, Mira said firmly, though her stomach churned with uncertainty. I won't let them. As she prepared to leave, Leary suddenly reached out, taking Mira's hand. An image flashed between them, not words, but a powerful impression of protection, of belonging. Tam, came the telepathic whisper, we stay together. Yes, Mira promised, swallowing the lump in her throat. We stay together. The inspection began precisely at 0900 hours. A delegation of 5 representatives from Astrobio's board, led by Security Director Berger and overseen by Colonel Orion Vex of the Ethics Council, entered Laboratory 6 with an air of grim determination. Dr. Hayes, Colonel Vex began, his military posture intimidating in the confined space. Please, walk us through the current status of the Diori Preservation Project. Mira gestured to the workstation where she and Elias had prepared their elaborate deception. As you can see from these logs, we experienced a critical failure during the electromagnetic storm 2 weeks ago. Despite emergency measures, the primary embryonic sample suffered significant degradation. She displayed the fabricated data, showing a steady decline in cellular integrity following the power failure. I've been attempting to isolate viable genetic sequences for potential future reconstruction, but the damage was extensive. Director Berger stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. And yet your personal power consumption has increased dramatically during this same period. Care to explain? Before Mira could respond, a soft chime indicated an incoming station-wide alert. All communications panels activated simultaneously. Security breach detected, announced the facility AI. Unregistered biological signature detected in residential section. Apartment 422. Mira's apartment. Her blood ran cold as Berger turned to her with a triumphant expression. Apartment 422. That would be your quarters. Dr. Hayes. Within minutes, the entire delegation was marching toward the residential section. Mira's protests ignored. Colonel Vex ordered a security team to meet them there, his expression grave. Whatever you've been hiding, Dr. Hayes, I suggest you explain immediately, he said as they approached her door. Unauthorized biological experimentation is a serious violation of Ethics Council regulations. Mira's mind raced. How had Leary been detected? The child had remained safely hidden for weeks. Unless Leary had left the apartment. The security panel beside her door showed signs of manipulation, small fingerprints on the access pad. Somehow, Leary had managed to bypass the lock. Please, Mira said desperately, as Berger overrode her security codes. Whatever you find inside, remember it's a child, a sentient being. A child? Colonel Vex repeated, momentarily taken aback. But before Mira could explain further, the door slid open. The apartment appeared empty at first glance. Then, from the small kitchenette area, emerged Leary, holding one of Mira's research tablets and regarding the crowd of strangers with enormous, luminous eyes. A collective gasp went through the delegation. Security officers reached for their sidearms, though none drew weapons. "Mira," Leary said, voice wavering with uncertainty. "Who are they?" For a moment, no one moved. Then Berger broke the silence, his voice cold with anger. "You've been harboring an active alien life form, in direct violation of at least 15 different regulations." He turned to Colonel Vex. "I recommend immediate containment and full biohazard protocols." "No!" Mira moved to stand between Leary and the others. "Leary is not dangerous. The storm triggered an unexpected developmental cascade in the Diori embryo. I've been studying the process. That's all." "In your private quarters?" Colonel Vex questioned skeptically. "Without proper containment or documentation?" "I was afraid," Mira admitted. "Afraid of exactly this reaction. Leary is sentient, telepathic, learning at an extraordinary rate. This isn't just a research specimen. This is a child." Director Berger scoffed. "It's an unauthorized biological experiment that poses unknown risks to this entire facility." As tensions escalated, Leary stepped forward, those strange eyes moving from face to face. Then, to everyone's shock, the child extended both hands, palms up, in a gesture of openness. What happened next would later be described differently by each witness. To some, it felt like a wave of emotion washing over them. To others, like suddenly seeing through someone else's eyes. For one brief, extraordinary moment, Leary established a telepathic connection with everyone in the room. Images flashed through their minds. Mira reading stories aloud, the wonder of first words, the comfort of being held when frightened, the simple joy of belonging somewhere. And beneath it all, a profound sense of trust and love directed toward Mira. When the connection faded, Colonel Vex was the first to recover. "Remarkable," he murmured, his military bearing softened by wonder. "True telepathic communication." Director Berger remained unmoved. "All the more reason for proper containment. This creature could potentially access classified information, influence decision-making." "My name is Leary," the child interrupted, voice stronger now. "And Mira is my mother." The simple declaration hung in the air, challenging the clinical terminology, the bureaucratic regulations, the fear of the unknown. "This changes nothing," Berger insisted. "Regulations exist for a reason. The specimen must be transferred to secure facilities for proper study." Mira felt desperation rising. They would take Leary away, subject this innocent child to endless tests, confinement, isolation, everything she had tried to prevent. "There is another option," came a new voice from the doorway. Dr. Elias Wright stood there, tablet in hand. "The Extraterrestrial Sentient Rights Provision, Section 7B. Colonel Vex frowned. "The humanitarian exception? That applies to established sentient species with diplomatic recognition." "Not exclusively," Elias countered, stepping into the apartment. "The provision states that any demonstrably sentient being may be granted protective status, pending full evaluation by the Ethics Council. What we just experienced was irrefutable evidence of advanced sentience." A heated debate erupted, with Berger advocating immediate containment, while Elias cited legal precedents and regulations. Colonel Vex listened to both sides, his expression thoughtful. Throughout the argument, Leary remained close to Mira, one small hand clutching hers. Occasionally, Mira would feel that now familiar touch against her mind, not words, but reassurance, trust. Finally, Colonel Vex raised a hand, silencing the debate. "I've made my decision. The Diori child will remain in Dr. Hayes's custody while the Ethics Council conducts a formal evaluation. Security measures will be implemented, but there will be no separation or invasive testing without council approval." Berger's face reddened with anger. "This is highly irregular." So is the sudden appearance of a telepathic child from an extinct species. Vex interrupted. We are in uncharted territory. Director Berger, I prefer to err on the side of compassion until we better understand the situation. As the delegation began to disperse, issuing orders for modified security protocols and scheduling emergency reviews, Mira knelt beside Leary. Why did you leave the apartment? She asked softly. I told you it wasn't safe. Leary's expression was solemn. I felt their thoughts. They were coming to take me. I wanted to find you first. Mira pulled the child into a tight embrace, realizing how close they had come to separation. It's going to be complicated now, she warned. There will be tests, questions, people watching us. But we stay together? Leary asked, those luminous eyes seeking confirmation. We stay together, Mira promised, hoping it was a promise she could keep. The days that followed were a whirlwind of evaluations, interviews, and heated debates among Astrobio's leadership and the Ethics Council representatives. Mira and Leary were moved to a larger apartment with enhanced monitoring systems. Not quite containment, but not freedom either. Scientists from across the station came to observe Leary, to run non-invasive tests, to marvel at what many were calling the scientific discovery of the decade. Through it all, Leary remained remarkably composed, answering questions when possible, demonstrating controlled telepathic abilities that left researchers speechless. The developmental rate is unprecedented, reported Dr. Naveen Shah, the station's chief xenobiologist. Based on cellular samples, Leary has the equivalent biological age of a 7-year-old human child. Despite being less than a month old, cognitive testing suggests even more advanced mental development. And the telepathic abilities? Colonel Vex inquired during one of the daily briefings. Dr. Shah shook his head in wonder. Unlike anything we've documented before, not just emotional projection, but actual thought transference. And Leary seems to be developing control rapidly, learning to direct the communication rather than broadcasting indiscriminately. Director Berger, who attended every session, remained skeptical. The potential security implications cannot be overstated. If this creature can access thoughts at will. I only share when invited, Leary interrupted, regarding Berger with those disconcerting eyes. It's rude otherwise. The simple statement, delivered with childlike certainty, prompted surprised laughter from several researchers. Even Colonel Vex's lips twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. Mira watched these interactions with a complex mixture of pride and fear. Pride in Leary's remarkable adaptability and intelligence. Fear of what might still happen if the Ethics Council ruled against them. Dr. Elias Wright became their most steadfast ally, working tirelessly to build a legal and ethical case for Leary's rights as a sentient being. He also became a friend to Leary, bringing educational materials and answering the child's endless questions about human culture, history, and science. The coalition I mentioned is mobilizing support, he told Mira privately one evening, after Leary had fallen asleep. Scientists, ethicists, even some political figures interested in extraterrestrial rights. Your case is becoming something of a cause célèbre. Mira glanced toward the bedroom where Leary slept, the child's natural bioluminescence casting a gentle glow beneath the door. I never intended to start a movement. I just wanted to protect Leary. Sometimes the most important changes begin with one person doing what they believe is right, Elias replied. Then, more seriously, the Ethics Council will make their preliminary ruling tomorrow. Colonel Vex has been fair-minded so far, but Berger has significant influence with certain council members. What are our chances? Mira asked, dreading the answer. Elias considered carefully. 50-50. The scientific significance of Leary's existence is undeniable, but there are legitimate security concerns given the telepathic abilities. Much will depend on how the council weighs those factors. That night, Mira lay awake long after Elias had departed, staring at the ceiling and considering contingencies. If the ruling went against them, could they escape? Where would they go? The thought of Leary confined in some research facility, subjected to endless tests and experiments, was unbearable. She must have eventually fallen asleep, because she woke to find Leary standing beside her bed, those luminous eyes wide with concern. "You're afraid," the child said simply. Mira sat up, making room for Leary to climb onto the bed beside her. "Yes, today is important. The council will decide whether we can stay together." Leary was quiet for a moment, absorbing this information. Then, "If they say no, we'll run away." The childish simplicity of the solution brought a sad smile to Mira's face. "It's not that easy, sweetheart. There's nowhere in this station we could hide for long." "Not here," Leary agreed. "But out there." A small hand gestured toward the window, beyond which Jupiter's swirling atmosphere was visible, and beyond that, the stars. "I see them sometimes, in dreams. Other places, other people like me." Mira felt a chill. "Other Diori? Leary, that's not possible. The species has been extinct for thousands of years." "Not extinct," Leary insisted. "Hidden, waiting. I feel them." Before Mira could question this remarkable claim, her communications panel chimed with an incoming message. Colonel Vex's face appeared on the screen. "Dr. Hayes," he said formally, "the council will convene at 1100 hours to deliver its preliminary ruling. Your presence, and that of the Diori child, is required." The council chamber was one of the largest rooms in the station, typically used for colony-wide announcements and official ceremonies. Today, it was filled to capacity with Astrobio personnel, ethics council representatives, and a small contingent of journalists who had arrived from Earth just days earlier, drawn by rumors of a remarkable discovery. Mira and Leary entered together, the child's hand firmly clasped in hers. Leary had chosen to wear a simple white tunic that Elias had provided, the fabric highlighting the pearlescent quality of the child's skin and the delicate patterns of bioluminescence that pulsed slightly faster than usual, a sign of nervousness. Mira had learned. They were directed to seats at the front of the chamber, directly facing the council members. Director Berger sat to one side with several Astrobio executives, his expression smug. Evidently, he expected a ruling in his favor. Colonel Vex called the session to order, his voice echoing in the hushed chamber. "This preliminary hearing will address the status and disposition of the sentient being known as Leary, of Diori genetic origin, currently in the custodial care of Dr. Mira Hayes." He outlined the facts as they had been established. The electromagnetic storm that had triggered the accelerated development. Mira's decision to nurture, rather than terminate the rapidly evolving life form. The subsequent discovery and evaluation period. The Council has reviewed extensive testimony from scientific, ethical, and security perspectives. Vex continued. "We have considered both the unprecedented research opportunity presented by this situation and the ethical implications of our decision." Mira felt Leary's hand tighten in hers. Through their now familiar mental connection, she sensed the child's anxiety and determination. "Before announcing our decision," Colonel Vex said, "we will hear final statements from the principal parties. Director Berger, as the representative of Astrobio's interests, you may speak first." Berger rose, straightening his uniform jacket. "Honorable Council members, while the emergence of this Diori specimen represents a scientific miracle, we cannot allow sentiment to override security and proper scientific protocols. This entity possesses telepathic abilities of unknown scope and potential. It has no legal status within our regulatory framework. The only responsible course of action is to transfer custody to Astrobio's Secure Research Division for comprehensive study under controlled conditions." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Mira felt sick at the clinical way Berger referred to Leary, specimen. entity, never child or even being. Dr. Hayes, Colonel Vex said, turning to her. You may now present your statement. Mira stood, suddenly aware of the camera drones hovering nearby, broadcasting this moment throughout the station and, via delayed transmission, to Earth and other colonies. What she said now would determine not just Leary's fate, but potentially how humanity would approach similar situations in the future. Honorable Council, she began, her voice steadier than she felt. I stand before you not just as a scientist, but as a caretaker and, yes, as a mother. When the storm caused Leary's unexpected development, I faced a choice. Treat this miracle as nothing more than a laboratory specimen, or recognize the emergence of a new sentient life, deserving of dignity and care. She gestured to the child beside her. In the weeks since, Leary has demonstrated intelligence, emotional depth, moral reasoning, and a desire to learn and connect. These are the hallmarks of personhood by any reasonable definition. To reduce such a being to a research subject, to separate child from caretaker, would be an act of cruelty incompatible with our highest ethical principles. Mira paused, gathering her courage for what came next. I formally request that this council recognize Leary as a sentient being with full rights under the extraterrestrial sentient rights provision, and further, that I be granted legal guardian status to continue providing the care and stability that any child, human or otherwise, requires. As she returned to her seat, she felt Leary's mind touch hers, conveying gratitude and pride. Colonel Vex nodded thoughtfully. The council will now— I wish to speak, Leary interrupted, standing suddenly. A murmur of surprise ran through the chamber. Colonel Vex appeared momentarily nonplussed, then inclined his head. The council recognizes Leary of Diori. The child stepped forward, those strange, luminous eyes surveying the assembled officials and scientists. When Leary spoke, the voice was clear and steady, carrying easily through the large space. I understand you are afraid of what I am, of what I might do. Leary's gaze moved deliberately to Director Berger, who shifted uncomfortably. You think, because I can feel your thoughts, I am dangerous. But feeling is not the same as taking. I would not enter your minds without permission, just as you would not enter someone's home without being invited. Leary turned slightly, gesturing toward Mira. She found me when I was nothing but possibility. She protected me when she could have destroyed me. She taught me words, stories, right from wrong. In your language, that is what a mother does. The child's voice wavered slightly. I am the last of my kind, at least here, now. Without Mira, I am alone. You ask, what is the right thing to do? I ask you, would you take a child from its mother? Would you make the last one even more alone? A profound silence fell over the chamber as Leary returned to Mira's side. Even Director Berger seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Colonel Vex cleared his throat. In light of this unexpected testimony, the council will recess briefly before announcing our decision. The 20 minutes that followed were among the longest of Mira's life. She and Leary remained in their seats while council members huddled in intense discussion at the far end of the chamber. Director Berger paced nearby, occasionally casting dark glances in their direction. Whatever happens, Mira whispered to Leary, know that I love you. We'll find a way through this. Leary nodded, eyes fixed on the council members. They are changing their minds, the child murmured. The one called Vex is persuading the others. Finally, the council members returned to their positions, and Colonel Vex called the session back to order. After careful deliberation, this council has reached a unanimous decision, he announced, his voice solemn. Mira held her breath, feeling Leary's hand squeeze hers almost painfully tight. We recognize the being known as Leary as a sentient individual entitled to protections under the extraterrestrial sentient rights provision. Furthermore, We grant temporary guardianship to Dr. Mira Hayes, pending a full adoption hearing to be scheduled within 30 days. A cheer erupted from one section of the audience, Elias, and several other scientists who had supported their cause. Director Berger's face darkened with anger, but he remained silent. This ruling comes with conditions, Colonel Vex continued, once the noise had subsided. Dr. Hayes will continue her research, documenting Leary's development for scientific purposes. Regular medical evaluations will be conducted by approved physicians, and Leary will participate in controlled studies of telepathic abilities, with appropriate ethical oversight. He looked directly at Mira and Leary. This is unprecedented territory for human-extraterrestrial relations. The Council's decision reflects our belief that scientific progress and ethical treatment need not be mutually exclusive. We will be watching this situation closely. With that, he formally adjourned the session immediately. Mira and Leary were surrounded by well-wishers, Elias first among them, beaming with delight. "You did it," he told Mira, clasping her hands. "Both of you. This ruling will set precedent for years to come." "We just wanted to stay together," Mira said, still somewhat dazed by their victory. As the crowd gradually dispersed, she noticed Director Berger approaching, his expression carefully controlled. "This isn't over, Dr. Hayes," he said quietly. "The board still has significant concerns about security implications. One ruling won't change that." Before Mira could respond, Leary stepped forward, regarding Berger with those unsettling eyes. "You're afraid of being replaced," the child said simply. "Humans always, but there's room for both." Berger's face flushed with anger, but he turned and stalked away without further comment. "Was that wise?" Mira asked as they finally headed back toward their quarters, now officially their shared home. Leary shrugged. A remarkably human gesture the child had picked up from Elias. It was true. The following weeks brought adjustment and cautious celebration. News of Leary's existence spread throughout human space, generating intense debate about extraterrestrial rights, scientific ethics, and the possibility that other supposedly extinct species might similarly be revived. A small but vocal minority protested the Council's decision, arguing that allowing a telepathic alien to develop freely posed unacceptable risks. Others hailed it as a new chapter in human-extraterrestrial relations, a step toward more compassionate scientific practices. For Mira and Leary, however, life settled into something approaching normalcy. The promised adoption hearing was scheduled, legal documents prepared, and a proper education plan developed to nurture Leary's extraordinary intellect while providing necessary socialization. Elias became a regular visitor, often bringing new books or educational materials. He and Mira grew closer, their shared commitment to Leary's well-being forming the foundation for a deeper connection. "The Coalition is using your case as a rallying point," he told her one evening, as they watched Leary absorbed in an interactive lesson about Earth's ecosystems. "There's talk of establishing an actual legal framework for extraterrestrial adoption in appropriate cases." Mira smiled, watching the gentle pulsing of Leary's bioluminescent markings, brighter now, a sign of happiness she had come to recognize. "I never imagined being at the center of a legal revolution. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with a single step taken for the simplest reasons," Elias replied. "You didn't set out to change the system. You just wanted to protect someone you loved." On the morning of the formal adoption hearing, Mira helped Leary prepare with special care. The child had continued to develop, now resembling a human 9-year-old in size, though the alien features remained distinct: the pearlescent skin, the luminous eyes, the delicate patterns of light that shifted with Leary's emotions. "Are you nervous?" Mira asked, as she straightened the new tunic they had chosen for the occasion. Leary shook her head. "It's just making official what's already true." The simplicity of the statement brought tears to Mira's eyes. "Yes, that's exactly right. The adoption ceremony was held in the council chamber again, though this time the atmosphere was celebratory rather than tense. Colonel Vex presided. His military formality softened for the occasion. Director Berger was notably absent, having requested reassignment to another facility shortly after losing the initial hearing. By the authority vested in me by the Ethics Council, and in accordance with the extraterrestrial sentient rights provision, Colonel Vex declared, I hereby formalize the adoption of Lyri, of Diori origin, by Dr. Mira Hayes of Earth. He presented them with an official certificate, a small thing, perhaps, but a symbol of everything they had fought for. Additionally, Vex continued, in recognition of the unique circumstances of this case, the Council has approved Dr. Hayes' request for extended research leave. You and Lyri are granted permission to travel to Earth for a period of 6 months, to introduce Lyri to your family, and to consult with specialists at the Xenobiology Institute. This was news to Mira. She had submitted the request weeks ago, but had received no response. The thought of taking Lyri to Earth, of showing the child the world she had come from, filled her with unexpected joy. As they left the chamber, Elias was waiting, along with several other scientists who had supported their cause. He embraced Mira warmly, then knelt to Lyri's level. Congratulations. Officially, the newest citizen of the human commonwealth, he said, offering a small package, a gift to mark the occasion. Lyri unwrapped it carefully to reveal a pendant, a small crystal that captured and refracted light in patterns reminiscent of the child's own bioluminescence. It's beautiful, Lyri breathed, immediately slipping it over her head. It's also a communications device, Elias explained, linked directly to mine. If you ever need me, no matter where you are, you can reach me. Mira felt a surge of gratitude for this man who had risked his career to help them, who had become not just an ally, but a friend, perhaps more, given time. Later that day, after the celebrations had ended and they had returned to their quarters, Mira suggested they visit the station's botanical garden, a rare luxury on a space outpost, but one that Lyri particularly enjoyed. The garden occupied a small dome at the uppermost level of the station, its transparent ceiling offering an unobstructed view of Jupiter's magnificent cloud bands and, beyond them, the stars. Inside, plants from Earth and several compatible alien worlds created a peaceful oasis of greenery and fragrant blossoms. As they walked among the garden paths, Lyri's hand in hers, Mira felt a contentment she had never expected to find in this remote outpost. Her life had changed irrevocably the night that electromagnetic storm had transformed a cluster of cells into this extraordinary child. What had begun as a scientific assignment had become something far more meaningful. A family, a cause, a future filled with possibilities she had never imagined. They paused beside a small pond where luminescent fish, a genetically modified Earth species, swam in lazy circles. Lyri watched them, entranced by their glow that echoed the child's own. "What happens now?" Lyri asked suddenly, looking up at Mira with those otherworldly eyes. "After Earth, after everything." Mira considered the question carefully. "That depends partly on what you want, what you dream of doing as you grow." Lyri was quiet for a moment, those delicate luminescent patterns shifting thoughtfully across pale skin. "I want to find others, the ones I feel sometimes in dreams. They're far away, but they're there." "Other Diori?" Mira asked gently. This wasn't the first time Lyri had mentioned such dreams, but Mira had assumed they were just that, dreams, the mind's way of processing the knowledge of being the last of one's kind. "Yes," Lyri said with certainty. "They're hidden, waiting. They need to know they're not alone anymore." Mira knelt beside the child, her child now, officially and forever. "If they're out there, we'll find them together. I promise." Lyri smiled, a radiant expression that made the garden's lights seemed dim by comparison. Then, with childlike directness that still sometimes caught Mira by surprise, "Mama, can I stay with you forever?" Mira gathered Leary close, feeling the gentle rhythm of the child's heart against her own. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You will always have a home with me." Above them, visible through the garden's transparent dome, a star seemed to pulse briefly brighter, as if in answer to an unspoken question. Perhaps it was just coincidence, or perhaps it was something more, a signal, a promise, a future waiting to unfold. For now, it was enough that they were together, mother and child, human and Diori, bound not by blood but by something equally powerful, the simple, transformative miracle of love.